Hello, everyone. I am Stephanie Schrader, and I oversee the Education Outreach and Diversity component of C-DEBI. Thanks for tuning in. This webinar is presented by C-DEBI, and it focuses on professional development skills needed both in and out of academia. And this series is held every other month, so stay tuned for our next seminar that will be in August. Before we start, I will review some webinar reminders and tips. You will be muted during the talk. So if you have a question, please use the chat box. Our speaker wants to have a discussion, so we will, if you have a question, we will interrupt the talk to answer the question. So feel free to post a question at any time. And this webinar is being recorded. Today's speaker is Dr. Brandi Kiel Reese, a professor at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. She will be discussing how to survive the early years in a tenure-track position. And with that, I will turn it over to Brandi.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning in and listening to what I have to say. I'm by no means the end-all, be-all expert in this, and I welcome a discussion about any of this. And if you have tips and tricks, that's great. I firmly believe that surviving a tenure-track position or any faculty position takes teamwork, and so that will be kind of the theme of today's talk. Also, I just want to give a little bit of background about where I am coming from. I'm a multidisciplinary researcher. I have degrees in geology, biogeochemistry, and biological oceanography. And I also spent 5 years in an environmental consulting position full-time and another year part-time as a consultant. So I have a background in both industry, but also in academia, as I have been in a tenure-track position since January of 15. But again, please interrupt me if you have any questions along the way. So I want to start by, first of all, congratulating you if you are a tenure-track faculty already, or if you're not and you're gearing up for it, that's great too. Once that dust settles and you've properly celebrated this huge achievement, hopefully you've listened to Karen Lloyd's advice a few months ago about negotiating your startup package. She gave a great webinar on how to get the most out of your startup and what other things you can negotiate. Now it's time to get to work because you have maybe 5 years. Sometimes some universities are 6 years. Of course, it's different, but most are typically 5 years until you submit your tenure portfolio. You submit your tenure portfolio, then you wait a year or sometimes 9 months until the committees, the various levels, have reviewed your portfolio and have made a decision. So I'm assuming you're here at the beginning. Try to ask yourself, first of all, what are you trying to achieve? Is your faculty position just about trying to keep your head above water? Is your ultimate goal just to get tenure, or is it to actually build a stimulating career, over this period? So, if you're like most new professors, you have a startup in hand. You have been given a number. You've been given a lab, a dollar amount, and you're right now bombarded by new lab startup offers. If you're not, don't worry, word will spread and the sales reps will be at your door in no time because they see you as fresh meat. So you will have a lot of people knocking on your door offering to sell you the latest and greatest and bundle it all in a package for a low, low price. But there's a lot more to this faculty marriage than just this initial honeymoon period. So you inevitably get there, and about 6 months, a year into it, everyone starts to feel, what did I get myself into? This is not what I thought it would be. What have I done? And that's normal. I feel a little overwhelmed in the first year, especially. In fact, it does go by in a bit of a blur. Sometimes you've landed in a department that's not what your degree is in. Maybe you're in an interdisciplinary department. That happened to me. I was, I felt a little bit like a fish out of water. But then I started to embrace my, unique attributes that I brought to the department. You may have a completely empty lab with not even a pen to sign your name. That also happened to me. It was completely bare and empty, and I looked around and it was beautiful, but we needed to fill it. And that was a little overwhelming. You may be looking around, you'd have renovations up to your eyeballs, and you may feel like, this is never going to get done. Facilities may be taking longer than you anticipated. But just take a deep breath, keep breathing, or else you'll suffocate. Your first, you'll hire your first student probably off of your startup or some department or college incentive. Some of you might be lucky enough to be bringing a grant with you, which is great, but others might be, having a startup or some sort of fellowship program that from your, college or your department or university that will get you started. And this is great. But if you're like me, you are going to worry about how you'll fund your grad student and future students for the next several years. So it's furious grant writing, and then you finally land some, and you feel like you can relax just a little bit just until the next proposal cycle comes around. Startup doesn't last forever. Some universities cut you off at 2 years or 3 years. Some universities will allow it to be indefinite. And if you're one of those, then that's great. You're lucky, but otherwise you've got a 2 or 3 year plan to spend down your startup. Then you get to this point where you need to turn in your dossier or your portfolio. Like I said, that usually happens about year 5. It could be 6 years for some universities. But you'll know, and your university will have a handbook, a guidebook that will show you, tell you what to do. But I want to stress here that your university, your peers, even your funding agencies, everyone is invested in your success. Use the networks that you have at your disposal, like C-DEBI. This is a fantastic network to lean on and ask questions and to use as your, as a sounding board. And also making new networks is important as well. Okay. Now, some resources that I want to start off with. These are some great, great ones that I've found. This is a guide. This is a free guide, Making the Right Moves, a practical guide to scientific management. This is put out by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. So it is a bit more focused on NIH, but the majority of the material in here is applicable across the board to all disciplines and all new faculty. But I recommend this also for postdocs, and I actually received this when I was a graduate student. And it's never too early to start reading up on these and to just start thinking about how you want to lead, take control of your own career and lead your own lab one day. Another one that's great is through the National Association of Geoscience Teachers. That's the Early Career Geoscience Faculty, Teaching, Research, and Managing Your Career. It's a fantastic workshop, and it's a multi-day workshop. It culminates in a visit to NSF. I can't recommend this highly enough for all of you. The topics include there about finding a balance, time management, also effective teaching, thriving in a research program, and even putting together that tenure portfolio. And there's some great leaders involved in that workshop. Also, the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity is another great resource. Your university can subscribe to have a membership to it. And your university probably already has a membership for it. If not, you might want to talk to your university faculty development center or your development program. All universities have a faculty development of some sort. And so the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity offers support groups, writing boot camps, workshops, all virtual. The Early Career Geoscience faculty is an in-person workshop. Okay. First thing, when you get to campus, some universities have a formal mentoring program where they assign a junior faculty to a senior faculty member. Some are more ad hoc, where you yourself just find somebody that you just click with. Maybe you have similar research interests. Maybe you have a similar background, or maybe just click in some way. But find someone you can trust. If the formal research or formal mentoring program isn't the right fit and it wasn't a great match, then it's okay to have multiple mentors. Maybe you want to reach out to somebody else. This could be your department chair, or it could be just another senior faculty member that you trust, and to ask just all sorts of questions. This mentor is someone that's going to help you through your promotion and tenure process. Every university and department and college has their own culture, so sometimes they can help you navigate the do's and don'ts of that culture. They'll give you constructive feedback on your career progress, and I mean being honest feedback. You don't want to find somebody that will just pat you on the back. You want to find somebody that will tell you when you need to make adjustments. They'll also provide encouragement and support. There's someone to lean on, helping to foster connections and visibility. They'll let you know about opportunities. They will get your name out there. They'll invite you to meetings and make sure you're involved in cross-disciplinary meetings, as the case may be. And they generally are looking out for junior faculty interests. They're keeping you from, keeping you on track, keeping you from, extraneous time commitments that most of us can get involved in. And like I said, you don't have to have just one. You might have several that fit different areas. I have personally a mentor for my teaching side, somebody that is, very experienced in teaching, and I can talk about tips and tricks and ways to engage my students in the classroom. I have another mentor that I reach out for research purposes, very similar research to mine, so I let them read my proposals and or run ideas by them, and I feel like they'll give me an honest feedback. All right, at the end of your 5 years, and perhaps sooner, and I'll get to that in a moment, you will have a tenure dossier that you put together. This can be a physical binder or a physical portfolio, and sometimes they're online, though. It depends on your university. Ours is still put together in a 3-ring binder. They'll outline the requirements in a handbook. As I said, the college and the university will have their own faculty handbooks for you to, as a guide, but they're generally divided into multiple sections. All portfolios or dossiers across the academic system have some general commonalities. You'll always include your full CV. Sometimes they'll ask for a particular format for your CV, but it will have the general publications, grantsmanship, teaching, mentoring, and service activities. You'll also have a list of your publications, and you will have a teaching narrative. This will accompany your teaching portfolio. This narrative is usually about a page. Sometimes 2 pages are allowable. Again, your university handbook will guide you, but it'll be a narrative about your teaching philosophy, your teaching successes, and even your teaching challenges and how you've overcome those challenges. The teaching portfolio will include your data for the courses you've taught and your student evaluations, if your university still has those, or peer evaluations, which are often advisable in lieu of or in addition to your student evaluations. And that's when your peers come and evaluate your teaching style and give you feedback, your constructive feedback. And that's always good to do regardless if you have a formalized system in place. You also will have a research section. Again, you'll give a narrative, which will be an overview of your research successes and your research direction. You'll have your summarize maybe your publications in there, and then also give your research plans for the coming years. And that will be followed by evidence of your grants and awards. Then you also have a service section. Again, that will be accompanied by a narrative about your outreach activities or your public outreach activities, but also your departmental, college, university, and even international service, as the case may be. And then, of course, evidence of that service as well. Then you'll provide names for external reviewers. It can be anywhere from 3 to 5 names. Again, your handbook will give you specifics. And then there'll be external reviewers selected by your college or your department. So those will be ones that are not on your list of that you provide. There'll be names that they select based on your research expertise. So all of these are things to keep in mind from the beginning. So from day one, you want to know what's involved in your tenure dossier and what the expectations are. So I'm going to go through 10 tenure track tips that I've been given, I utilize myself, and things that I've also learned along the way. First of all, start early. If you're a postdoc, start now. If you're a grad student, it's okay. Start thinking about how you're going to, navigate your career in the long term. But definitely, when you get to campus, make a strategy. You only have 5 or 6 years until you submit your dossier, so take control of the tenure timeline, and don't be taken off guard. Some things you have control over, and some things are in the hands of your department chair, or if you're teaching, your curriculum committee. But if you can, plan your teaching load. What courses will you design, and when do you want to teach them? Do you want to, teach all of your courses in one semester? That's probably not advisable. But think about these kinds of questions. Will you teach large undergraduate survey courses? Do you want to couple 2 large courses together? Your semester might be, quite hectic in that case, so that may not be a strategic plan you want to follow. Plan your grants early. When does this line up with grant deadlines? If you're in the, for example, NSF, Ocean Sciences, February and August are the grant deadlines. Do you want to plan that your spring semester is a little bit lighter to meet that February deadline? Or, are you looking for fall deadlines in your more concerned about grant deadlines in the fall, and you want that to be a little bit lighter. So plan it out as much as you can. These are all hypothetical questions to always ask yourself, and also get advice from your peers as well. You sometimes have a little control when you, about when to publish some existing data sets. Yes, you always want to get high impact data out the door quickly, but if you're anticipating a lag somewhere in your timeline, you may want to think about how you can strategically publish some of your data sets to avoid holes in your publication record. And overall, plan your research direction. And I'll talk about this again later in a later slide, but stay true to yourself. You are, going to be approached by many different people from all different directions to pursue one project or another. And it's exciting. Everything is new. You're the new kid on campus, or new kid on the block, and they want everyone wants to work with you, which is great, and they'll continue wanting to work with you. However, don't spread yourself too thin. Plan your research direction, and don't be afraid to stick with it. First, another thing you want to do when you get to, in your first years on campus is learn the expectations at your university. Like I said, consult the handbook, talk to your department chair, talk to your dean, if your dean's available, and talk to your mentors. How do they do annual assessments? How do those work? What time of year are those annual assessments? Are they in the spring? Are they in the fall? Do they have a third-year review? My university does have a third-year review, a formal third-year review process, most of them do, in which we submit a full dossier. It is, think of it as your draft dossier. It doesn't go beyond the college level, but the department and the college will review it and give you feedback as to your, progress, and also as to, what you've put into your dossier. It sounded very daunting at first, and I'll admit that I did not look forward to putting it together. But after I did, I was very happy that I went through that process, because it showed me that, where I needed to improve. It also showed me where I needed to, what I needed to keep doing the same. And a lot of my narratives were written in advance. So now I just need to go back and revise those narratives. So I was really pleased with putting together the physical third-year review dossier. There's also some unwritten expectations. Sometimes there's written expectations. Some universities will have exactly what you need to do, to get tenure. But a lot of times it's a bit vague, a bit ambiguous. You need X number of publications each year. You need X number of grant dollars, or maybe just showing, attempt at grant obtaining grant funding. So talk to your colleagues. What are those both written and unwritten expectations? Do they put emphasis on student evaluations, or is the emphasis on peer evaluations for your teaching? Do they give you credit, so to speak, for volunteering on a lot of extra committees, or is that something that's frowned upon and they'd rather you spend your time, doing more research activities? And also review successful dossiers. Your colleagues are generally going to be very welcoming to the junior faculty to, give you their dossier. I'm happy to let anyone see mine. If anyone would like to see any of my narratives, or what was in my tenure portfolio. So don't be shy. Feel free to ask your colleagues. And I liked this little joke here because in reality, this is we spend a lot of time on teaching. We spend a fair bit on research and service, but you sometimes feel like your department wants you to spend 200% of your time doing everything well. So this is was just a little bit of a joke on how we would like to spend our time. Just don't tell me what to do. One of the first things that you can start doing as well is marketing yourself. Make a website for your lab. Just give departmental seminars or college seminars, or even seminars across campus, but promote yourself. Attend large conferences, small conferences. We're all used to doing that. We're all academics here, but go to these early career mixers and workshops and start building your network of early career peers as well as senior faculty. A good way to do this, if you're uncomfortable with promoting yourself, is to promote your students' work. They need you. They're relying on you to be their advocate. So I get very excited when my students hit milestones or accomplishments, and have research. I can promote their research. So, and that's promoting yourself too. But definitely promote your students' work, even if you don't feel comfortable promoting yourself. And then get to know your marketing and communication staff at your university. Every university has one. Get to know them, go over to their office, say hello. I've noticed that a friendly hello and a friendly greeting really goes a long way with all administration. But Jen Biddle gave a great webinar on using social media in academics, so go watch that. You can use it as much or as little as you like, but in the end, it's about promotion. And I have another tip that helped me, at least, is to get your students involved. If they're already on social media, which most of them are, and they're good at it, then let them take the reins and be in charge of the lab Twitter account or the lab Facebook account. A couple of things like that, or maybe a lab Instagram page if you want. But having them take ownership or be involved. Of course, it's on a case-by-case basis. Talk with your student about being professional, and they probably are. But it's a great way for them to be involved, and it takes a little bit of the load off of you. But it also helps you to stay connected to new publications or conferences that you couldn't attend, or connecting you to resources in other labs, which I've taken advantage of as well, finding out that another lab had something that could help me as well, or help my lab group. Okay, so service. Most universities expect about 10% of your time to be devoted to service, but easily that can be swallowed up, and can be time consuming if you let it. So be wise and pick your service wisely. Just make sure that you are doing professional service that directly benefits your career in the long run. I saw an interesting quote from the resource that I showed you earlier from the HHMI, so Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and it says that conscientious service provides few tangible benefits, but if you do a good job, you can certainly get an awful lot of, if you don't do a good job, you can certainly get an awful lot of negative reward for it. So in other words, you're not going to get a whole lot of attaboys for doing more service than you need to. But if you do a poor job at it, if you're taking on too much and you're letting things slide, and you're not being a good contributor, then certainly there's a lot of negative rewards there. So think about service on university-wide committees versus departmental committees. Sometimes university-wide committees may be less beneficial than department service. Remember, performance evaluations come at the department level, So, think about, how your chair and your dean, who are very involved in your, annual review process, think about their needs and are you meeting their expectations for service? Also, picking committees that are visible, impactful, and promote your career goals are a good thing. If you're at a predominantly teaching institution, then maybe the curriculum committee may be a great way for you to make an impact on the courses that your department or college will offer. But if you're at a more research-oriented institution, then maybe the research council is a great way to meet other researchers from other colleges and departments, and what will have an impact on the research direction of your university. Also, international service.
Brandi,
Yes.
Oh, Brandi, this is Stephanie. I have a question. How many committees are you on?
I'm on one university committee, and I'm on a college committee. My favorite committee that I was on, and I was advised to be on, was the Distinguished Lecture Committee. So I brought in distinguished lecturers to the college. So it gave me a chance to get to know and host different lecturers that came to campus that were, had a lot of notoriety. So that I found to be, a great. It was just the right amount of involvement. Now, things like faculty senate, I don't recommend. And most everybody would agree with me for pre-tenure, faculty that can get too much into the politics, into the weeds, and also can be more time-consuming. So things like faculty senate, save for your post-tenure. But for my service, my university wants us to keep it light for pre-tenure folks. So a university level and maybe a college or department level. So maybe 2 is fine. And they'll certainly tell you and recommend you for more or less. And honestly, they don't remember how many you're on, so feel free to remind them. If you get put onto, a new committee, and it's okay to, ask advice and phrase it as asking advice. Don't just say no, but I'm on this committee and this committee. Do you think do you think I have time for another one? And sometimes they'll say yes, and sometimes they'll remember that you are overextended, perhaps. But I'm on 2 different committees. I'm on a library committee now, so I select library books for my department and program. So I found that to be a fun one because, heck, I felt like there wasn't enough geomicrobiology books. So we got to rectify that. So something like that can be beneficial to yourself and to your students. And then also, are you doing enough? Likely the answer is yes. So you don't really need to probably worry about that. You are doing enough. Between being a reviewer for proposals or a reviewer for your journals, various journals, your service to your professional organizations and department and university level, you're probably doing enough and you don't even realize it. All right, get to know your program managers. This is a huge one, huge, huge, huge. People who know you are more likely to invest in your potential. Meet your sponsored research office as well. That's on here too. Your sponsored research office is who submits your proposals and your grants, and they become your best friend throughout the process. So get to know your program managers, get to know what they like, what they need, professionally what they need, and where the direction of their particular agency is going. Don't forget about local and state agency program managers. These are also just as important as the federal funding program managers. Learn how the decisions are made at all levels and offer to review proposals. This is singly the best thing I ever did as a postdoc was start to review proposals as an ad hoc reviewer, so that when I started on my, as a faculty member, within 6 months, I sat on my first review panel. It's never too early to start sitting on a review panel. It is a myth that review panels, you have to have received a grant to be eligible to sit on a panel. This is not true in any way. I sat on 2 NSF panels in my first 2 years for 2 different programs. And you know, I learned that each program operates in a little bit different fashion. All federal funding agencies are truly invested in the success of early career researchers, and they recognize the importance of getting new faculty trained. This was, like I said, this is the most helpful thing I did starting out. And now I can see what goes on during the review process, which makes it less elusive. So send them your CV, send them your website if you have one, send them a short bio about your research and research interests, and be proactive about getting to know how the proposal process works. And man, it improves your writing so much. Just seeing how what makes a successful proposal. So speaking of writing, write something every single day. Schedule a writing time every day for 30 minutes or 60 minutes. This can involve outlining or mapping a new project, free writing, line editing something you've already written. But in the end, find or start a support group. It'll help you a lot. I think about it this way. You have a teaching schedule, and you're going to be in the classroom Monday, Wednesday, Friday for an hour, or Tuesday, Thursday, perhaps for an hour and a half. And nobody expects you to take a call, answer an email, have a meeting during that time. Everyone understands that you're going to be in your classroom teaching your course and engaged with those students. So the same should be said for your writing and your research time. Make this a priority and stick to it. Writing is a process, and that process takes time and it takes practice. My favorite resource is Writing Science by Josh Schimmel. He also has videos that he's made, as well as this is a great book, and it's he also is a microbial ecologist, biogeochemist, so it's written in language and uses examples that we can truly understand. So we don't want to publish or perish. We want to publish and be successful. But also with our grant writing. So every day, write something. Write. Work on the research in some way, and carve time for yourself. Okay. And speaking of time, your time is also valuable, so don't waste it. It's really easy to get caught up in every new project that comes along, and they will. You have a shiny new lab, a shiny new perspective, and your colleagues love you. But remember, again, to stay true to your research. So branching out's great if that's the direction you want to go. Otherwise, it's okay to say no. A lot of early career folks that, and myself included, when we're writing a proposal, we don't want to be too ambitious in our budget. And there was times that we, have all put in, you maybe just, I'm speaking if you're on a 9-month appointment, appointment in which you have 3 months to raise your own salary. Some of you guys are on 12-month appointments, which is great. Some are completely soft money, so that's a different situation, and Julie Huber talked about that one. But if you're on the standard 9-month appointment and you have 3 months during the summer in which you're responsible for raising that salary, it's easy to feel like you can't, you should undercut your budget so there's more budget left over for supplies, or in our case, sequencing, which we know costs a lot, and we don't want to be very expensive. But don't be afraid to include your salary into a proposal, even the small grants, even the $20,000 or $50,000 grants. Include your time. Your time is worth something, and your time is valuable. And program managers do understand that, and they expect it. But also manage your time wisely. You know, work on your teaching, work on your research. You know, budget and create a schedule for yourself, a time budget. And you can't do it all. That sounds obvious, but in practice, we as academics try to do everything and do everything excellently. But don't be afraid to delegate, and don't sweat the small stuff. Trust and delegation go hand in hand, and it really does build teamwork with your students in your lab. So students need to learn; they need to make mistakes too. So trust them, and allow them the freedom to to try and make mistakes. Think about things like, do you really need to shop around for an hour to save $10 on pipette tips? So sometimes it's just purchase and move on, and don't try to sweat, every little detail. In fact, I delegate the shopping to the students. This teaches them how to maximize the budget. I ultimately do the purchase, so I review what's being purchased, because I don't have a lab manager. Some of you guys might, and that's great. But I delegate the shopping to the students. It teaches them how to maximize the budget, and they then appreciate how much things really cost. So they realize that to not just waste a whole tube of enzyme, for example. But huge part of this this slide is your health, your family, your relationships, mental and emotional health. They need your time too. So budget that into your time. Take time for yourself. Another tip is to get to know your students, and this is not just within your lab group, but also students in other groups, other lab groups, and also students in your classroom. These are the foundation of your success as a professor. So connect with these students personally, and this goes back to being a good mentor. What model do you want to use with your graduate students? Do you want an open door policy, formal lab meetings, individual lab meetings? But make yourself available to students to answer both their questions and their academic issues. I've learned a lot to set clear expectations, communicate. That is pervasive throughout my lab group and throughout my teaching style. Be honest with your students and your student recruits. This is, maybe honest about the environment, the culture of your, city or institution. Make sure they're a good fit for you and your working style. Are you open door, or are you, give them more autonomy? Are you hands off or hands on? Things like that. You want to make sure that your student that you're recruiting is, like I said, a good fit for both you and your lab group. So get your students, if you have current students, get them involved. If you don't have current students, then maybe get your mentor involved in helping you, with successful recruiting early on. It is very important to get off onto the right foot with recruiting, but you can change your mind. You can, what I mean by change your mind, not change your mind about a student, but change your mind about your style. Maybe your style needs to be flexible and, needs to be adjusted for the particular student group that you have. So communicate your expectations early and often. So some things need to be reiterated. I have a great lab handbook that was given to me by a colleague who received it from a colleague of hers, and so on and so forth. So it's been carried forth with several iterations, and I've even passed it on to other colleagues that have come after me. So I have a lab handbook, and it's expresses those expectations. Your syllabus in your classroom is another way to communicate your expectations early. And as you all know, one of the #1 things that students ask you in your classroom is questions that are obvious on the syllabus. And how many times do we all have to say, go read the syllabus, or it's on the syllabus? And of course, that just is a way of saying that we need to re-communicate our expectations. We need to reiterate and have those heart-to-hearts, if you will. So make sure that you keep up good communication and allow the others to the freedom to communicate their needs from you. So that goes back to being flexible. Some students need to meet more frequently in the beginning before they are off and running, and other students are just more naturally independent, and everybody's a bit different. By the end of, for new students, I expect to meet with them every other day in the first few weeks, maybe even every day, as they get their feet underneath them and they're getting adjusted to the lab and to the new environment. But by the end of the semester, I'm meeting with them once per week with pop-ins as needed. But as they move further along, we meet as a group during lab meeting once per week. Then I have individual meetings with them every other week, again with pop-ins as they come up. So as they're growing as a student, they're getting more freedom to, and they want to make more decisions on their own, and a little bit of leeway. But each student is different. Everyone's needs are different. Some need more reassurance, and others, just want to check in with you with, their individual questions. However, in order to, stay involved as a new faculty member, it's important to schedule that time and make sure that they are open to meeting with you, every week, either as a group or individually. All right, and lastly, but not least, is definitely the imposter syndrome. Everybody starts as a faculty member feeling like they don't, they don't belong there. Oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? This is what I know versus what I think others know. It's normal, and it's okay. And it's okay to not know the answer, and it's okay to feel insecure. And maybe it gets better with time. I don't know, but it's just know that there's a reason why they hired you, and they're glad to have you there, and you deserve to be there, just like everybody else. If you don't feel insecure, then that's fantastic, but do have some empathy and remember that it's not the case for everybody. So I'll just leave you with this, some mistakes to avoid. First of all, I can't say it enough, you need to take care of you. As a tenure-track faculty, you're suddenly a plumber, an electrician, an accountant, a psychologist, a career counselor, an engineer if you're doing field work, a teacher, project manager times 3 or 4 or 5 projects, depending what you have going on, and a public speaker for outreach. So all of this fractures your time, and it's mentally taxing. Sometimes it's emotionally taxing. So take time for a hobby, relax, disconnect, and spend time with your loved ones. Go on a trip that isn't associated with meeting, whatever works for you, and don't feel guilty about it. But definitely a mistake would be failing to find time to do your own research or writing, spending too much time on class preparation, unless that's the focus of your position, failing to moderate student incivilities. So if there are problems that are building or bubbling up, make sure you address it, nip it in the bud, have open communication right away, and be flexible about different strategies for alleviating it. As I mentioned, failing to take care of your own health, that's hugely important. Not taking time for personal and family life, and not watching your tenure clock. So remember to make that strategy and stay on track the entire 5 years. And also taking on too much administrative work. And it is okay to tactfully address if you feel like you're taking on too much, and reaching out to your mentor for help. With that, are there any questions that I can take?
Great, Brandi. That was incredibly informative. And as Brandi said, if there are questions, we have about 5 minutes. Brandi, I have a question. Did you find that the way that you partitioned your time changed once you got tenure?
Sorry, say that again.
How did you budget your time before you got tenure, and then has that changed since?
Well, I haven't received I haven't received tenure yet. So I anticipate that it won't change, though. And from talking with folks that have just received tenure, it doesn't change a whole lot either. If you start off with good habits, definitely keep those habits up. Carving out time for your research, carving out time for yourself, carving out time for your students, in your lab group, and also teaching prep and teaching. So really budgeting your time likely won't change. Now, after you get tenure, a lot of people do take on more administrative roles. Perhaps they become the program director, or maybe they become an associate chair, or start chairing committees. So perhaps your service goes up a notch. But if your long-term goal, because remember we're cultivating a long-term career plan here, is for a successful research program, then absolutely you want to make sure that you're keeping your time budgeted towards that direction. Same thing with if you're leading a teaching university or a teaching program. So budget your time with respect to your career goals.
All right, Andrew has a question. They asked, do you have any advice that is gender specific? So I'm assuming maybe that means stopping the tenure clock or something of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't let family planning stand in your way, or don't let tenure stand in the way of family planning. Both of those, are completely compatible. And especially this day and age, I feel like a lot of universities, most universities and departments are understanding of that. In definitely working mothers and fathers as well, have small children, or children of all ages, but they have children that need them. So don't sacrifice that. Certainly, it's a wonderful calling, this job that we have, and it can be all-encompassing in our life, but definitely we need to make sure that our loved ones and children are taken care of as well. The gender specific for women, there are some great women networks. Earth Science Women's Network, if you're not a part of that, that's a good one, and a good advice. Has good advice for mothers specifically. I think that we have a responsibility in our leadership as faculty members to be sensitive towards different genders, ethnicities, orientations, and I think that just because you're on the tenure track doesn't mean that you shouldn't speak up about injustices that you might see. So I think that can be done in a very tactful way. I think it's also something that we as leaders need to continue to do. So don't let it, there's a myth that, stay quiet, don't rock the boat until you get tenure, and it's about being collegial. It's about being a good, faculty member to your colleagues. But it's also important to, be aware of injustices.
Great. And Nagisa has a question about suggestions for managing work-life balance. For example, when do you stop responding to emails, and are you working on the weekends?
I am horrible about that. So I do as I say, not as I do. I go through phases. I'll answer emails, into the evening or on the weekends, and then I'll go through a phase where I try to set more boundaries and maybe not maybe write the email, respond to it in the evening, but not send it because I also want to be respectful of other people's time, and I don't want them to feel like they have to respond to me just because I sent a response. So it's this is something I would love to have, a discussion about with other people, because I could do better, and certainly we all can do better. But yes, I do work on the weekends. Not, I would say maybe a few hours here, a few hours there, but I try to work in a very concerted way where I have a home office and I'm able to close the door and concentrate for a couple of hours. And I find that's better than trying to, distractedly try to work on something while, watching a show with, my husband, for example. But so I will try to do that, or when my partner's out, that I will spend that time and catch up on a few things. So yeah, my suggestion is to I've liked the approach of if somebody if I need to catch up on emails, I will send them while my internet is off, and I'll save them in my Outlook box so I can send later. And that helps me, A, get it done, but also so I don't disrupt their, be respectful of their, evening or weekend. And, same thing, on the weekend. Sometimes I'll catch up on things, but for the most part, I try to be, try to set some boundaries. I know we're academics, and when there's a deadline looming, we have to get it done.
Well, great. Thank you, Brandi. That was fantastic. As it is 1 o'clock, there are no more questions. So with that, I will say thank you again, and we will post this video up shortly.
All right. Thank you all. Feel free to email me or reach out anytime.